Shabbat Shalom. The Israeli poet Yehuda Amichai has a famous piece known as Shir Ein Sofi, or the Infinite Poem, which reads as follows. Inside the brand new museum, there's an old synagogue. Inside the synagogue is me. Inside me, my heart. Inside my heart, a museum. Inside the museum, a synagogue. Inside it, me. Inside me, my heart. Inside my heart, a museum. I have been thinking about this poem recently because it reminds me of what is probably my favorite place in the entire world, the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. Within this particular museum, there is not just one synagogue, but an entire exhibit dedicated to synagogues from all different locations around the world. From India to Germany to Italy to even the Caribbean with its sand-covered floor. These sanctuaries have clearly been taken from their original homes and restored in the heart of Jerusalem. As the war continues to unfold in Israel, there felt like perhaps no more poignant image than these synagogues from the diaspora, carefully rebuilt in a museum in Jerusalem, at this time when Libenu b'Mizrach, our hearts are well and truly in the East. This poem is also, you might have caught it, written in such a way so as to be endlessly repetitive. If you're anything like me, you can maybe see that infinite loop as a symbol of the spiraling state of our hearts and minds as we deal with all of the emotions surrounding the last 3 weeks. On that note, however, there's a beautiful Tosefta that teaches us to make a heart of many rooms. We can take this moment to fully recognize that many of us are feeling a myriad of emotions right now, and many of them heavy upon our human shoulders, from anxiety to grief to fear to even anger. Our hearts are divided up into room after room after room as we explore their chambers, some of them as old and familiar as a synagogue, and others as cavernous and new as the brand new museum that Amichai describes. This is to say that we know there is an immense communal and personal struggle and grief at this difficult moment. And we want you to know that we see you, we hear you, we feel you, we acknowledge you, and we're here for you. With that in mind, Shabbat seemed like the perfect opportunity to break this spiral of solemnity, even just temporarily, in the spirit of Shabbat, and explore a room within our heart that we might not have entered into recently or for a little while, that of tikvah, of hope. At Holy Blossom, we often refer to our home here in Canada, where we live and work and love and have a responsibility to attend, and our homeland in Israel, the place of our hearts and spirits' longings. It is our hopeful response on both fronts which I wish to address this Shabbat. So let's look first at our hopeful response on the home front. In hearing your stories and being with many of you through the ups and downs of these recent weeks, what has been so deeply moving and so deeply heartwarming are the countless phone calls and emails and conversations with you, members of our sacred congregation, who simply want to do something, anything, to help. Whether that's asking that general question of what can we do, to referring our team to specific initiatives or specific resources, that very Jewish response of wanting to respond is appreciated as a lift to the neshama, and you should know that. To that effect, our Toronto Jewish community have sent through the UJA, whose efforts we are supporting, not one but two massive waves of aid to Israel. So in that first wave alone, upwards of $60 million was donated to the UJA's emergency appeal and has been distributed to a variety of causes, including emergency grants for victims of terror and traumatized communities, protective equipment for first responders, assistance to Holocaust survivors in the line of rocket fire, and medical supplies and other essential goods. And without all of you, that would not be possible. As of this week, with the second wave of aid, which was about $4.5 million, that circle was able to be expanded to cover other areas of concern, working in partnership now with Israeli NGOs to cover such things as critical services for evacuees, at border communities, emergency baby products, support to help evacuate Israelis with disabilities, emergency aid for young leadership based in Gaza border communities, and even equipment to aid in the recovery, identification, and burial of victims. We can and we should take some comfort and hope in knowing that our aid is having a positive, direct impact in making the lives of our Israeli brothers and sisters just a little bit easier at this terrible time. I know this to be true from a text I received from Ella Payorski, our amazing Shinshinit from last year, just before last Shabbat, which read, "We can't stop talking here about the incredible support from the community in Toronto. You are all so kind, and we can feel your support here." In other words, our own hopeful response has not just been important for our own hearts and souls at home in Toronto, but also for our Israeli loved ones in our shared homeland, who need us now more than ever. On that note, let us take a look at the response in Israel, our homeland. For that, we'll need a little bit of context. This past Tuesday, our Drash group held their launch event for the fall season. Originally planned to be a joyful, fun Yiddish cabaret, the gathering was pivoted instead to be a panel of speakers focused on Israel through an intergenerational lens, because this is the purpose of Dorot, which means generations. One of those speakers was Holy Blossom member Shai Menuchin, who sits on our Israel Engagement Committee. Some of you might know him. When asked what gave him hope amidst the current crisis, he said that it was not the government or even the IDF, but rather the extraordinary galvanization of the people, of Israel's civil society. To lift up but a few examples, there are stories of Israelis from all walks of life lining up for 11 hours to donate blood at the Pais Arena in Jerusalem. Other stories include of mothers donating breast milk for orphaned infants, florists crafting arrangements for funeral wreaths instead of wedding bouquets, and thousands of hot meals being prepared in restaurants across the country to be sent to army bases and hospitals. I would be remiss too not to mention the unbelievable work of our Israeli progressive movement. We can highlight the efforts of their social action arm, Keren B'Kavod, who've been working tirelessly to provide food, toys, or other supplies, or specific support to marginalized populations such as refugees and Ethiopians and the Druze, or even organizing rides in private cars to transport evacuees to centers all over the nation. Additionally, our rabbinic colleagues are also working miracles and doing everything they can to support their congregations and communities, including through the officiation of countless funerals and shiva minyanim, and we cannot put those aside. Yet, in a final embodiment of hope, in a way that links both home and homeland, we can turn, believe it or not, to the internet. Some of you may have seen it already, but there is a meme from the early days of the war that came to my attention at a study session your rabbis participated in earlier this week, facilitated through the Shalom Hartman Institute. Posted on X, formerly Twitter, by a man named only as Osher, it reads, "In another 1,000 years, there will be another festival about them trying to destroy us and failing, and the minhag, the custom, will be to eat Rachel's cookies, or mashu, or something. So for context, this Rachel that Osher refers to is Rachel Edrei, who's become something of an Israeli folk hero after she plied Hamas terrorists with tea and Moroccan cookies until the police stormed in and killed her attackers. Apart from the opportunity to be with one another and to study together, being a salve for sore hearts in and of itself, what lessons might this viral internet piece weave together about hope? The first is from Rachel herself, who, through her almost 20-hour plight between hospitality and brutality, she's come to represent the ingenuity of everyday Israelis amongst the devastation and chaos of October 7. The second is what we discussed in our Hartman session, which is the hope, or even the assumption, that amongst this existential crisis there will be endurance. Quite literally, Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel, will live. Subsequently, another celebration typifying that Jewish adage of "they tried to kill us, let's eat" will emerge. This new commemoration, after all, is framed by this Osher not just as an Israeli holiday, but one which is marked by Jews the world over. Indeed, Osher even suggests what we know it could look like, that we will all, Jews and Israelis alike, join in solidarity by eating those infamous cookies inspired by the courage of Rachel Edrei. Ken Yehi Ratzon. As we conclude tonight, we can take into account the teaching of the psalmist, who writes that the joyful heart is a good medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones. Holding the pieces of our shattered hearts in our hands, yet taking heart from the overwhelming responses from our intrinsically linked home and homeland, of generosity and care and bravery and support and compassion and countless stories thereof, we hearken to the words of the Israeli anthem, Od lo avda tikvatenu, we have not yet lost our hope. As we continue to navigate the complexity of the divided rooms of our hearts, let us, sitting in this synagogue on this Shabbat, take a few moments to simply sit in and pray for a Shabbat shel Shalom, a Shabbat of peace and rest. Shabbat Shalom and Shalom al Yisrael.